What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Guys at Magic. I'm going to be your host, Riley, and today I'm going to be taking you through a deck tech of one of the brand new cards that was just spoiled, and that's going to be the Deadpool trading card from our new Secret Lair. Generally speaking, I'm not actually the biggest fan of most comic books or most superheroes or anything like that, but I do really like the way that they captured Deadpool for this, so I was pretty excited whenever I saw this card just get released. This is a card that I personally did want to rush out and go pick up as well, and then be able to play around with it and build a deck with it. So that's kind of the general gist of what I'm going for with this. This is, I would argue, about a bracket 2 to a bracket 3. There are things that you can do to increase the overall power level of this deck, and I'll make some of those suggestions at the very end, but this is going to be something that you can take down to your LGS really just with the intention of having some fun. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce you, in the case that you aren't already familiar with Deadpool trading card. He is 2, a black, and a red. For 4 mana, you get a 5/3 legendary creature. It's a mutant mercenary hero, and it says, whenever it enters, you may exchange its text box and another creature's. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 3 life, and then you can pay 3 mana and sacrifice this creature. Each other player draws a card. Essentially, what you want to be doing with this is you want to be having Deadpool ETB, taking the text box of whatever the coolest creature is that's in play, and then giving your opponent, preferably, this creature that is just going to sit around and just drain their life, hit them for 3, unless they sacrifice it to then draw a card. And I love this card. I think this is really cool. This kind of reminds me of like Oko, whenever that was around in Standard, where it was just like blanking or elking like the biggest, scariest creatures in play. But now we have the access to have something like that in the command zone, which I feel like is really, really scary. So let's go ahead and dive in with the rest of the deck. Generally speaking, I would say that I built this as more just kind of like kind of like the opposite of group hug, more like a group pain. We're here to just kind of like have some fun, cause some chaos, and close the game out as quickly as we possibly can. I'll talk about the Planeswalkers first. The first card here is Obnixilis Reignited. It is 3 and 2 black for 5 minutes. A legendary creature Planeswalker. It's Nixilis. Enters with 5 loyalty. It does have a +1 where you draw a card and lose a life. A -3, destroy target creature, and a -8 target opponent gets an emblem with. Whenever a player draws a card, you lose 2 life. I know that this is a card that's been reprinted several times. This seems to be one of the most popular Planeswalkers that pop up in like precons. I actually do like this one. I love card draw. I love the flexibility of being able to destroy creatures, and in the case that you do manage to pop an ult, that's probably just going to end somebody's. Just the one Planeswalker though. Let's go ahead and dive in with some of the creatures. The first group of creatures I'm going to go with, they kind of all have a theme, and these are basically just going to drain our opponents. What we're really trying to do here is make sure that we're hurting our opponents as much as possible, not just with our commander, but with just playing the game of Magic in general. So the first card here is Blood Artist, 1 and a black. Creature vampire, it's a 0/1, and whenever another creature dies, target player loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. So you're going to be able to drain your opponent. This is also going to pad your life total, which is going to be really important because this deck does have a tendency to hurt itself, just as a little bit of a heads up. Zulaport Cutthroat is also in this list for pretty much the exact same reason. 1 and a black, human rogue ally. It's a 1/1, and it says whenever it or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. So this one kind of spreads out that drain to each of your opponents, but it only cares about your things dying, so it's not quite as punishing in that regard. And then lastly, here we have Falconwrath Noble. This is 3 and a black for a vampire noble. It's a 2/2 with flying, and then it says whenever it or another creature dies, the target player loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. So similar effect here as Blood Artist. I do have 2 creatures moving over into this next category, and this is just going to be kind of like starting to spread some of the pain. The first card here is Bloodseeker. This is 1 and a black for a vampire shaman. It's a 1/1 and says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you may have that player lose 1 life. You're pretty much just always going to opt for them to lose that 1 life. It doesn't serve you as any additional benefit for you not to. Similarly, Rampaging Ferocidon is in here, and this is 2 and a red for a creature dinosaur. It's a 3/3 with menace. It says players cannot gain life. That is going to include you. It also says whenever another creature enters the battlefield, Rampaging Ferocidon deals 1 damage to that creature's controller, and once again, this will include you. So that kind of being one of the big key differences here. I really like these kinds of effects. I feel like they just help to close out the game. Yes, this is going to hurt you. I know it's fully intentional. I'm not building this deck with the intention of going out there and just like, I don't know, stomping around on tables. I'm going out there with the intention of having fun, and this is the Rakdos Chaos Have Fun version that I've decided to build. Up next, we have a couple of creatures that are really going to just like punish people and start to drop some life totals very, very quickly. The first of which is Dire Fleet Ravager. This is 5 mana for a 4/4 Orc Pirate Wizard. It's got Menace, it's got Death Touch, and it says whenever it enters the battlefield, each player loses a third of their life rounded up. Once again, this will impact you, so just have that in mind. You are going to cause some chaos and some shenanigans for yourself, but that's totally fine. If your deck is working, you're going to be hurting your opponents, and then also, of course, obviously with Deadpool, potentially having that like kind of cumulative pay 3 life for your opponents. This is going to really hurt them, hopefully a lot more than it's going to hurt you. Emberwild Captain here is 3 and a red for a Djinn Pirate. It's a 4/2 and says whenever it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch, which means if you're not familiar, you'll draw a card at the end of your turn until somebody steals the Monarchy from you. And it says whenever an opponent attacks you while you are the Monarch, then Emberwild Captain deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in their hand. So this kind of synergizes not just with dealing damage, but with Deadpool, all of the other players, whenever somebody sacrifices that like text box creature, are going to be able to draw a card. So Emberwild Captain is going to be able to benefit us, making sure that our opponents are going to be penalized for having those larger hands. Harsh Mentor is in here as 1 and a red for a 2/2 human cleric. It says whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, or a land on the battlefield, if it isn't a mana ability, Harsh Mentor deals 2 damage to that player. So even now, whenever they're sacrificing their text box Deadpool switcheroo thingy, it's going to still hurt them. So it'll hit them for an additional 2 life here. Fate Unraveler is a way that we're going to be able to benefit from our opponents drawing extra cards. This is 3 and a black for an enchantment creature hag. It's a 3/4 and says whenever an opponent draws a card, Fate Unraveler deals 1 damage to that player. Generally speaking, drawing cards is incredibly powerful in Magic. Your opponents are going to have draw engines set up, so Fate Unraveler will be able to get in for a decent amount of damage. Very similarly, we have Nightshade Harvester. This is 3 and a black for 4. You get an Elf Shaman. It's a 2/2, and it says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your opponent's control, the player loses 1 life, and you put a +1/+1 counter on Nightshade Harvester. Similar impact here. Our opponents are going to get penalized for just simply playing the game of Magic, and I love how neither of these actually impact us, so we're still feel free. You can continue to play, draw cards, play lands. These don't hurt you. Razorkin Needlehead is 2 red for a human assassin. It's a 2/2, and it says it has first strike during your turn. So really just kind of like as an aggressive tool there. But it also says whenever an opponent draws a card, deals 1 damage to them. So the same kind of impact as the previous 2. Rug of Smothering is kind of a fun one in this list. It's 3 mana for an artifact creature construct. It's a 1/3 with flying and says whenever a player casts a spell, they lose 1 life for each spell they've cast this turn. This one does start to get out of control pretty quickly, and if you're playing up against like a spell slinger deck, this will very quickly shut them down. Now, notably with this, it is a player, so you're going to be included in that. Just make sure that you're sequencing things correctly. This next group of creatures is all going to help us out whenever it comes to drawing cards. The first of which is Bloodgift Demon. It is 3 and 2 black for a 5/4 with flying. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, target player draws a card and loses 1 life. Generally speaking, that's going to be us, but we can penalize our opponents for drawing cards. So if you need to and you have the engines in play, you can actually target your opponents to have them start drawing and having them start hopefully losing quite a bit of life with this. Morbid Opportunist is a creature human rogue. It is 2 and a black for 3 mana. You get a 1/3, and it says whenever 1 or more creatures die, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Now, that is kind of a little bit of a bummer that it triggers only once each turn, but this doesn't care about who owns the creature. So if your opponents are sacrificing their text box, Deadpool, then you're going to be able to draw a card off that, which is hugely impactful. And then also we have Stormfist Crusader. For a black and a red, you get a creature human knight. It's a 2/2 with menace. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card and loses 1 life. So just an additional little way to make sure that you're drawing cards while also continuing with that punishment. A creature that we have that's going to be able to benefit us whenever our opponents are losing life during their turns is going to be Valgavoth, Power of Souls. This is 2, a black and a red. For 4 mana, you get an Elder Demon. It's a 4/4 with flying. It has Ward of Pay 2 life. It also says whenever an opponent loses life for the first time during each of their turns, you put a +1/+1 counter on Valgavoth, and it draws you a card. So nice little card draw engine here, and just going to be adding into the pain that we're already causing. The next two creatures, kind of adding in with that same theme, these are going to start to really hurt our opponent, and some of the ones that are going to start taking off quite a bit of life from the top. The first one here is Sunspine Lynx. This is 2 and 2 red for a total 4 mana. You get an elemental cat. It's a 5/4, and it says players cannot gain life. That does affect you. It also says that damage can't be prevented. That is such a cool line of text that confuses so many people in Magic. Just wait, if your opponents have something with protection and you play this, they're in for a bad time. And then lastly, it says whenever it enters, it deals damage to each player equal to the number of non-basic lands that player controls. We're a 2-color deck. We do have a pretty solid number of basic lands, so hopefully this doesn't impact us too much. But if we are playing up against a pod where maybe one of our opponents is a 5 or a 4-color deck, this is really going to hurt them. The Lord of Pain is 3, a black, and a red for a legendary creature, Human Assassin. It's a 5/5 with Menace. Your opponents can't gain life. And it says whenever a player casts their first spell each turn, choose another target player. The Lord of Pain deals damage equal to that spell's converted mana cost to the chosen player. This is just another way for us to spread some hurt. Grey Merchant of Asphodel is 3 and 2 black for a creature zombie. It's a 2/4 and says whenever it enters, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black, and you gain life equal to life lost this way. This is a nice little way for us to be able to just make sure that we pad up our life total, while also potentially just taking out one of our opponents. Kukusho the Evening Star is 4 and 2 black for 6 mana. You get a legendary creature, Dragon Spirit. It's a 5/5 with flying and says whenever it dies, each opponent loses 5 life and you gain life equal to life lost this way. Just basically another big swing to be able to pad our life total. Plus, who doesn't love playing with this? This card used to be banned in EDH, so happy it's back. Now, these next group of creatures that we're going to be talking about, these are going to be some of the creatures that you really want to see over the course of the game because they synergize so well with our commander. The first of which is Dunlino Wild Mage. She is 3 and a red for 4 mana. You get a legendary creature, Elf Shaman. She's a 3/2, and she says that whenever she attacks, you choose target creature you control, then you roll a d20. If you roll between a 1 and a 14, you create a tapped and attacking token that is a copy of that creature, except it's not legendary, and it has exile this creature at the end of combat. If you rolled a 15 through a 20, you create one of those tokens, and then you roll again. This is really cool with our commander because anytime an additional copy of Deadpool enters, we can have them make the switcheroo with that ETB, so that one of our opponent's creatures are going to get the new text box, and even if we have to sacrifice our token copy of Deadpool at the end of the turn, or at the end of the combat, it's totally fine. Their creature is not getting its abilities back, so it'll continue to just sit around and either hurt them, or they can get rid of it for attacks, and then we'll draw a card, which is just added benefit. Orthion, Hero of Lavabrink, is 3 and a red. For 4 mana, you get a 3/3. It's a legendary creature, Human Soldier, and it has an ability where you can pay 1 and a red and tap it to create a token that's a copy of another target creature you control. It gains haste, and you sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Activate only as a sorcery. It has an additional ability in which you can pay 6 and 3 red for a massive amount. 9 mana, you can tap it, you create 5 tokens that are copies of another target creature you control. They gain haste, sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step, and activate only as a sorcery. Now, the really cool thing about the previous card, Delina, that I was talking about, is that she kind of subverts the legend rule because the token that you make is not going to be legendary. Orthion, however, does not do that, so these tokens will come in and they will immediately check, see that the legend rule applies, and then they'll just kill themselves off. So you will have to sacrifice the copies of Deadpool immediately. It's a little bit of a bummer that they're going to do that, but we still have plenty of other ETBs that we can take advantage of in this deck that are really going to punish our opponents. Plus, even if our copies of Deadpool just immediately die, they still actually get that enter the battlefield trigger, so they're still going to be able to swap and mess with our opponents, be able to just have them blank a creature. The next card here is the Master Multiplied. This is 4, a black, and a red for a legendary creature. It is a Time Lord Rogue. This is a 4/3 with Myriad and says the legend rule doesn't apply to creature tokens that you control. It also says that triggered abilities you control cannot cause you to sacrifice or exile creature tokens you control. If you haven't picked up quite yet, this card works so well with the previous two that I just talked about because it gets rid of you having to actually sacrifice or exile those tokens. So now your copies of Deadpool, doesn't matter if they're legend, the legend rule doesn't impact you, and they don't go away. You don't have to sacrifice them. They're not going to check themselves out or anything like that. They're just going to stick around and cause a massive amount of problems for your opponents. Plus, the Master Multiplied on itself, with it having Myriad, just can very quickly take over a game if your opponents don't take care of this card. The next group of creatures, we're going to go back into the Pain package. The first one here is Kevrick the Merciless. This is 5, a red and a black for 7 mana. You get a legendary creature, Human Shaman. It's a 5/4 and says whenever an opponent casts a spell, this deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to any target. You can hit your opponent's face, you can hit your opponent's creatures, just kind of like start to clean up the board a little bit, or clean up, well, your opponent's. Cardor Doomscourge is one of my favorite cards, and this is going to be making the list here as well. It is 2, a black and a red for a legendary creature, Demon Berserker. It's a 4/3 and says whenever it enters the battlefield until your next turn, creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able, and attack a player other than you if able. So it kind of goads the board. It also says whenever an attacking creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. That's going to last for more than just that original turn cycle, unlike its first ability, but once again, really cool, impactful card here, and we have so many ways to be able to make copies of things. So he's also kind of a unique effect and pretty cool to be able to make copies of, and we'll go into that later on. Unstoppable Slasher is 2 and a black. It's a creature zombie assassin. It's a 2/3 with Death Touch. It says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, they lose half their life, rounded up. It also says whenever it dies, if it had no counters on it, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control with 2 stun counters on it, so this thing will just come back later on. It is a little bit slow if it does end up dying, but this is a massive threat to our opponents. It's really going to have them just like chump block or throw something in front, and that's totally fine here. Vile Smasher the Fierce is 1, a black and a red for a legendary creature, Goblin Berserker. It's a 2/3 and says whenever you cast your first spell each turn, choose an opponent at random. Vile Smasher deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to that player or planeswalker that player controls. It has partner, but in this deck, that's just going to be flavor text. Basically, what this is just more random damage. We're going to be causing chaos. The next card is going to hurt us a little bit, but that one is Zozu the Punisher. This is 1 and 2 red for a legendary creature, Goblin Warrior. It's a 2/2, and it says whenever a land enters the battlefield, Zozu the Punisher deals 2 damage to that land's controller. Do keep in mind this does include you, so every time that you play a land, you're going to shock yourself, but your opponents are probably going to have to deal with Zozu pretty quickly, especially if you're playing up against like any kind of lands matters deck. If you haven't noticed, this is kind of like a just like stack of anti, I don't know, group hug. This thing just hurts everybody, and that's kind of why I like this deck. In order to help clean up the board a little bit and cause some additional pain, we have Massacre Worm. This is 3 and 3 black for 6 mana. You get a Phyrexian Worm. It's a 6/5 and says whenever it enters, creatures your opponents control get -2/-2 until end of turn, so get rid of all those tiny little things that they got. And it also says whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. For players who want to go wide, this is probably just going to take him out of the game. That's going to do it for our creatures. Moving forward, we're going to talk about some of our instants and sorcery, kicking this off in that sorcery package, the first of which going to be Blasphemous Act. We're including this not only because it's a very good card, but also because it's included in the secret layer, so how can you not have this? It is 8 and a red for a sorcery. It says it costs 1 less for each creature on the battlefield, and it says it deals 13 damage to each creature. You'll probably just be able to nuke the entire board with this. That's totally fine. It's a board wipe. It's what you want it to do anyways. We also have Toxic Deluge. This is 2 and a black. It's a sorcery as an additional cost to cast a spell. Pay X life. All creatures get -X/-X until end of turn. This is a deck that hurts itself. This is a card that hurts you, so be mindful of that. But, I mean, it's on theme, and this is probably black's best board wipe, so I'm going to put it in the deck anyways. Vandal Blast, also included in the secret layers, a single red mana for a sorcery. It says destroy target artifact you don't control, or if you overload it for 5, you destroy all artifacts you don't control. So wonderful card here, and ooh, that artwork, Burning a Black Lotus, that's pretty rough. To continue with the pain, I'm going to add in Disrupt Decorum. This is 2 and 2 red for 4 mana. You get a sorcery. It says goad all creatures you don't control. This is a fun little way to just make sure that your opponents are going to swing out. It leaves them open the following turn where you can just have at somebody and you don't have to worry about any of their pesky blockers or anything like that. As far as instants go, the first one that we have here is Bolt Bend. This is 3 and a red for an instant. It says this spell costs 3 less to cast if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. Change the target of a spell or ability to a single target. Basically, what you're going to be doing with this is if your opponent targets Deadpool with something, because that creature has power 4 or greater, you can just pay 1 red mana, and if you do, then you can divert that spell, change the target of it. Obviously, if you did want to be playing around with something a little bit more on the powerful end of things, you could be playing Deflecting Swat, but these two cards, very, very similar. It's just this one will cost you at least 1 red mana, and then obviously, if you want to make that upgrade, you can go ahead and jump over there. I've got Bolt Bend in this list because it is significantly cheaper. Continuing here, we have a bit of a removal package. This first one is Deadly Rollick. 3 and a black for an instant. If you control your commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost. It says exile target creature. This one is included in the secret layer, so obviously we're going to play this. Not only does it have amazing, and very intimidating artwork, but it's also a really good card. So super happy to see that this one got a reprint here. Plus, I mean, who is not intimidated by this butterfly, rainbow, unicorn shenanigans going on? Infernal Grasp is 1 and a black for an instant. It says destroy target creature, you lose 2 life. Nice, short, sweet, simple, and I guess it's still on theme that we heard ourselves. Also, we've got Saw in Half. I include this in my creature destruction, but you're never using this on one of your opponent's creatures. Saw in Half is 2 and a black for an instant. It says destroy target creature. If that creature dies this way, its controller creates 2 tokens that are copies of that creature, except their power is half of that creature's power and their toughness is half of that creature's toughness. You use this card like what the artwork is depicting. You use it on your commander. You use it on Deadpool because it doesn't matter. Deadpool dies. It's fine. You'll be able to cast it later on. But then you get 2 copies of Deadpool that are going to come in. You don't care about their power and toughness so much, but what you do care about is the fact that they just switched over that ETB, that text box, with 2 of your opponent's things. So now your opponents just don't have cool creatures, and you know what? Sure, one of yours is going to die for Legend Rule. It's just going to check itself out, but it doesn't matter. And then lastly, as far as our package for single target removal, we've got to Terminate. It's good old-fashioned. It's a black and a red for an instant. Destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. Can't play Rakdos without that. The next group of instants we're going to talk about are all designed to basically do the same thing, and that is to make sure that we can continuously abuse some ETB effects, specifically from our commander, but if we want to, we have other cards in our deck that have some pretty nasty ETBs too. The first card here is Feign Death for a black. You get an instant. It says, until end of turn, target creature gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped with a +1/+1 counter on it. Not Dead After All is a single black mana for an instant. It says, until end of turn, target creature you control gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under control, then create a Wicked Roll token attached to it. Supernatural Stamina is a single black mana for an instant. It says, until end of turn, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. And Undying Malice is a single black mana for an instant that says, until end of turn, target creature gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. All of these are just simple combat tricks, but what they allow us to do is to attack in, and now our opponents are really kind of forced to make a decision. Do they want to risk having our commander get blocked because, well, Deadpool only has 3 toughness, he dies relatively easily. Do they want to risk maybe us putting in one of these cards real quick, being able to save our commander, and then also take advantage of another ETB on that, potentially blanking out one of their other creatures? This is just another way for us to be able to make sure that we're maximizing the number of ETB effects that we can get. Plus, it's just kind of an extra cool little thing to know that, well, whenever you try to kill Deadpool, it doesn't work. I feel like it's a little on point for the character. We've also got a Rakdos Charm in here. Rakdos Charm has saved me more times than I can count. It's a black and a red for an instant. It says, choose 1, exile all cards from target player's graveyard, destroy target artifact, or each creature deals 1 damage to its controller. That last mode is so good against token decks, and because this is an instant, it just can come out of nowhere and ruin somebody's day. But I love the flexibility of this card, and because of that, it's going to make the list. Moving forward, we're going to talk about some of our artifacts. The first little group here, I'm not going to spend too much time on. These are all going to be our artifact ramp package. The first of which is Arcane Signet, 2 mana, tap it, add 1 mana of any color. Felwar Stone is 2 mana. You can tap it to add 1 color of any color that a land and opponent controls could produce. Woo, that was hard for me to say. And then Mind Stone, we can pay 2 mana to get into play. You can tap it for a colorless, or you can later on just tap it, sack it, pay 1, and then draw a card. I love all of these. 2 mana rocks is really kind of like where I find my sweet spot, so that's why I play them. Rakdos Signet is 2 mana for an artifact. You do have to pay 1 to tap it, but it'll add both a black and a red, so it kind of mana fixes you, plus it just, I don't know, it counts for itself. It's 2 mana after the thing that you've tapped down. Soul Ring, wouldn't be playing a commander deck without it. You already know what it does. And then Talisman of Indulgence is a 2 mana for an artifact. You can tap it for a colorless, or you can tap to add either a black or red, but if you do, it'll deal 1 damage to you. I love these talismans. Sure, they may hurt you once or twice over the course of a game, but it's really not going to be that much. Thought Vessel is in here as well as an additional 2 mana artifact. Ramp. I love these kinds of effects. What can I say? I'm sorry, I'm addicted to them. 2 mana, you have no max hand size, you can tap it, add a colorless. And then Cursed Mirror is going to wrap up this package. I just think this one is kind of fun in this list. It is 2 and a red, so it is 3 mana. It's an artifact that you can tap for a red, but it has some extra synergy here, is that you can have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield until end of turn, except it has haste. If you need a mana rock, you could play this as a mana rock, but later on in the game, you could just use this to copy Deadpool, have him come in, and then take out one of your opponent's creatures, or just kind of like, I keep saying take out. It's not destroying, it's just like blanking the switching the text box type thing. I don't know what to call this. It's just shenanigans, and I love it. Now let's talk about some of the equipment in this list, because, well, Deadpool likes swords, so obviously we've got to include some here, and there are some that work very, very well with him. The first of which is Blade of Selves. This is 2 mana for an artifact equipment. It has an equip cost of 4, and it says the equipped creature has Myriad. Myriad, as a reminder, for those of you who maybe don't remember what this says, it says whenever the equipped creature attacks, for each opponent other than the defending player, you're going to put a token as a copy of that creature onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking the other players. So if you have 3 opponents in a game of Magic, which you typically will, and you have this on your commander, you attack, you will make 2 additional copies, one swinging at each of the 2 players you didn't originally swing at. Super cool effect here. Yeah, sure, they're going to die. They're going to legend rule. Doesn't matter. We're just going to make shenanigans with extra ETBs. So really what it is every time Deadpool swings, we are now trading 2 text boxes, and it doesn't matter, because like they're still going to check out and Deadpool's going to die, and it's fine, but I don't care. Sword of Hearth and Home is 3 mana for an artifact equipment. It costs 2 to equip, and it says the equipped creature gets +2/+2, has protection from both green and from white, and it also says whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you exile up to 1 target creature that you own, and then you search your library for a basic land card. You put both of those cards back onto the battlefield under your control, and then you shuffle. You don't actually have to equip this one to Deadpool to make this card good. You equip it to anything that can get in for some damage. You swing in, you blink Deadpool, and you ramp. So this is fantastic. Next up here, we have Helm of the Host. This one is exceptionally nasty. For 4 mana, you get a legendary artifact equipment. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn, you create a token that's a copy of the equipped creature, except that token is not legendary, and that token gains haste. It has an equip cost of 5, so it's a little bit more on the expensive side, but this allows us to get extra Deadpools in play, and these Deadpools don't die because they're not legendary. They don't check for the legend rule. 2 other artifacts that I wanted to include in here because they just kind of synergize really nicely, and I think that they're kind of cool. The first of which is Erratic Portal. This is 4 mana for an artifact. You can pay 1, and you can tap it to return target creature to its owner's hand unless its controller pays 1. Sure, you can use this for shenanigans. If your opponent ever taps out, you can go ahead and do this, and this is just kind of fun. But what you really want to be able to do this with is just use this on Deadpool. Use this on your commander. If you put Deadpool back into your hand, next time that you cast him, because he's coming from your hand and not from the command zone, you don't actually have to pay the commander's tax. You just have to pay the 4 mana that's part of the mana value of the card. So it is a cool little way for you to just kind of like get around that. Plus, you can always use this defensively. Obviously, you're not going to pay the 1 to prevent this effect on something that you control, so it's not taxing in that regard. And then there's just fun things you can do if your opponents tap out. And then next up, we have Conjurer's Closet. For 5 mana, you get an artifact. It says at the beginning of your end step, you may exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. So same thing. Use this on our commander. Use this on another one of those creatures that we want to take advantage of the ETB. 2 other artifacts are going to be included in this list. The first of which is Phyrexian Altar. This card is a little bit on the expensive side, so if you want, you can swap this out for Ashnod's Altar. They work somewhat similarly. I do prefer Phyrexian, but I'll explain why this card's in here. For 3 mana, you get an artifact. It says you can sacrifice a creature to add 1 mana of any color. The main reason why I'm putting this in is because what if our opponents start to get around things and they're just pesky and they just don't want to attack us, or they just, I don't know, don't want to block our Deadpool or whatever the case may be, and he just sits around and doesn't die, and I don't know, we can't take advantage of those ETBs. Well, this is a way that we can guarantee that he will die. This is a way that we can guarantee we can get him back into the command zone, and then also still be able to generate some additional mana, hopefully to be able to either recast him or cast other spells that turn. Like I mentioned, if you are looking for a budget alternative with this, and that just sounds so silly because the other card used to be expensive too, but Ashnod's Altar has seen quite a bit more on the reprint value aspect of things, so it functions pretty much similarly. It does add 2 mana to your mana pool, but that mana is colorless, so it's a little bit less friendly for you to work with. And then next up, I have Mirror Box. I love it whenever I get to play around with weird cards, and decks like this get they allow me to do that, so I'm super excited here. Mirror Box is 3 mana for an artifact, and it says, the legend rule does not apply to permanents you control. Each legendary creature you control gets +1/+1, and each non-token creature you control gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with the same name as that creature. So just make as many Deadpools, and now the legend rule that we were worried about earlier no longer applies. And even with that, we were never really super sweating it because we're really just kind of maximizing that ETB, but now I'll be stuck with a bunch of extra copies of a 5/3 that hopefully have another cool ability stapled on top. So Mirror Box is really, really cool in a deck like this. Moving forward, we're going to go with the enchantments. The first two, I'm going to put in a Court of Ambition and a Court of Ire. Court of Ambition is 2 and 2 black for an enchantment. It says whenever it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. And then it says at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card. And if you're the monarch, each opponent loses 6 life unless they discard 2 cards. So the reason why I'm including this card is not only because it's really good card draw, but because it's also going to help to punish our opponents. And obviously, we want to continue to do that. I talked about Court of Ire already. This one is 3 and 2 red for a 5 mana. You get an enchantment. It also says whenever it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. And then also on top of that, it says at the beginning of your upkeep, Court of Ire deals 2 damage to any target. But if you are the monarch, it deals 7 damage instead. If you have these in play, you can keep your commander back on block duty. It incentivizes your opponents to attack you because they don't want you to be the monarch, obviously. But it is really cool because now we're just going to be dealing additional damage, and these cards giving us the monarch will at least replace themselves, as we're going to draw a card at the end of that turn. If we can hold on to the monarchy, it's additional card draw and just a lot more pain for our opponents. Speaking of pain, our next enchantment is Painful Quandary. This is 3 and 2 black for an enchantment. It says whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player loses 5 life unless they discard a card. 5 life is really steep, and you're going to discard cards super fast to be able to dodge this effect. So no matter what happens, we're okay with it. We're hurting our opponents, and this is a monster to deal with. And then, of course, the final enchantment here. This is Echoing Assault. It is 4 and a red for an enchantment. It says, creature tokens you control have menace. And it says, whenever you attack a player, choose target non-token creature that is attacking that player. Create a token that is a copy of that creature, except it's a 1/1. The token enters tapped and attacking that player, and then you sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. This is just a cool little way for us to be able to throw in a 1/1 Deadpool that'll probably legend check itself and just die off, because I'd rather keep the 5/3 than the 1/1, but it's still a really cute little card. Plus, I mean, it's like death by mouse, at least in the artwork, so I love that. Moving forward with all this, we're going to talk about the mana base. The first group of cards that I have, these are all in the similar category of just like basically they help out with mana fixing. So Blood Crypt is the shock for these colors. You can have it enter the battlefield tapped. You can pay 2 life and it'll come in, it'll shock you, it'll deal 2 damage to you, and it's good to go right away. Command Tower, you know what it does. Tap it, your life is easy. Dragon's Skull Summit, you can tap it for a black or a red, but it only enters the battlefield untapped if you control either a mountain or a swamp. Exotic Orchard will tap for 1 mana of any color that an opponent's land can produce. Haunted Ridge will enter the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more lands, which should be relatively easy to do. And then it can tap for a black or a red. Luxury Suite, so long as you have 2 opponents, this will come in and it'll tap for a black or a red. So this is great. Wonderful card in EDH. Sulphurous Springs, this is the pain land. You can tap it for a colorless, or you can tap it for either a black or a red, and it'll deal 1 damage to you. These cards are more than worth it. Put them in every single deck. I love these. Tainted Peak, also another card that I'm going to be putting in here. You can tap it for a colorless, or you can tap it and add either a black or a red mana to your mana pool, but you can only do that if you control a swamp. So make sure you have a swamp if you got Tainted Peak. The next 2 cards, these ones don't help out with mana fixing, but they do help out with just other aspects of the deck. The first of which is Bajuka Bog. It enters the battlefield tapped, but it exiles target player's graveyard. Super impactful and super important against graveyard shenanigan decks. And later on, you can tap this for a black. This is one of the only cards that I actually put in my deck that has like no stipulation to always come in tapped. It's just that powerful of an effect. I love this card. Castle Lochthane. This is a land that enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a swamp, in which case it's just good to go right away. You can tap it for a black, or you can pay 1 and 2 black to tap it and draw a card, then you lose life equal to the number of cards in your hand. This is a cool little draw engine. This card is incredibly painful, so probably only going to want to use this if you don't actually have any cards in your hand. If you are playing Hellbent, or Heckbent as what it was called, or I guess we'd like return to Innistrad. It's a cool little impact. It's a cool little way to make sure that you just have extra cards in your hand. The next group of cards, these are just purely in here for utility. Each of these actually don't add anything for our mana fixing. The first of which is Reliquary Tower. You have no max hand size, but you can tap it for a colorless. Love that effect. Rogue's Passage is a land that you can tap for a colorless. You can also pay for and tap it, and target creature can't be blocked this turn. I love Rogue's Passage. Not only do we have some creatures that are pretty nasty and that we want to be able to connect, but you can use this on one of your opponent's creatures whenever they attack one of your other opponents. So I love having Rogue's Passage. It's just like a diplomatic tool to just kind of like mess around with people. Like, oh man, they've got a 10/10 and now it can't be blocked, so deal with that. Scavenger Grounds is a land that is a desert, not impactful at all in terms of that being a card type, but whatever. You can tap it to add a colorless, or you can pay 2 mana, you can tap it and sack it, and then exile all graveyards. This one hits your graveyard as well, but shut down those graveyard shenanigans. We don't like those. And lastly here, we have War Room. This is land that you can tap for a colorless, or you can pay 3, you can tap it, and you lose 2 life, because that's how many colors are in Deadpool's color identity, and you'll draw a card. I love that effect. War Room is one of my favorite lands. If you're playing in a mono or in a 2-color deck, you should probably be putting this in like every single time. I even put this in some 3-color decks, depending on how much I want to stretch this. And then lastly, as promised, we do have that pretty decent number of basic lands. I've got 10 basic mountains, 12 basic swamps. I haven't run into any issues just kind of goldfishing or playing around with this deck so far with the mana base. That is a lot of basic lands, but I mean, for the most part, it works out pretty fine, and we do have at least one card in the deck that is going to punish us for some non-basics, so we like to make sure that we have a pretty critical mass of those. So with that being said, that is my version of a Deadpool deck. I put this together really with just kind of the intent of just having shenanigans and fun with Deadpool itself. This is such a cool card in that it does something that is so incredibly unique in Rakdos. It causes that chaos, it causes that havoc, but in a way that I haven't really seen before. So very excited to be able to play around with this in paper. Hopefully I can get this card in here soon. I don't know whenever they're going to be shipping these out, but just from kind of goofing around on Moxfield, very, very happy with this. Now, before I go ahead and wrap things up, I will go ahead and say there are a couple of cards that I would obviously love to be able to put into this deck. I chose not to just for monetary reasons, but things like, for example, Shield of the Apocalypse, if you have a copy, it works so well in this list because your opponent's going to be drawing extra cards, and it'll also gain you some life. It's just that card is like, I don't know, like $80 right now. So I personally can't justify throwing something like that into this list. If it does fall, or if you have a copy of it, by all means, throw that thing in here. Same thing whenever it comes to like Deflecting Swat, and I talked about that earlier as well, where you can get rid of the bullpen. So just a couple ways that you can continue to upgrade this, but I felt for the price, they weren't super necessary. Let us know down in the comments below what you think about this deck. What other cards would you have included, or what cards do you not like from my inclusion? I do love the feedback. Make sure that you like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. We got a ton of other videos coming out here soon. And then drop a comment down below if there's any other legendary creatures that you want to see us do a deck tech on. We do pay attention to all that kind of stuff, and we like to feedback into what the community says. So thank you again so much. Once again, make sure that you like and subscribe, and then follow us on our social media platforms.
And a very special shout out to all of our Patreon subscribers. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for your added support. If you guys want to check out what they're seeing, which is not here on YouTube, please check the link in the description below and consider subscribing. And a very special shout out to our Gains Indestructible tier, starting with Brian Ganella, Daryl Tripp, Demarion Turner, Doc Jerome, Jimmy Ward, Kevo, Larry Killian, Thrifty PSGR, and Tim K. You guys are awesome. Appreciate every single one of you.
And until next time, this has been Guys at Magic. Peace.